MEC Schafer, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. So, the Human Rights Commission is among the organizations that have come out to criticize the decision to resume schooling for grades 7 and 12 in the Western Cape this week. They were saying that only 80% of schools there are ready to reopen. How many schools have you actually reopened?
To our knowledge, all schools were ready to reopen, except for maybe one or two that had COVID cases detected and had to do disinfecting. But as a result of the chaos and confusion yesterday, we had 98% of our schools that did in fact open. So the point is, we're not saying that, what we're saying is if there are schools that aren't ready, we will help them to get ready during the course of this week, as we are all doing across the country. But that the minister had gazetted the 1st of June as the starting date, and that we had worked very hard to get towards that point. And we've done that overwhelmingly.
Yesterday we had on the program an organization calling itself the Bishop Lavis Community Action Group, which is saying it's not happy with the readiness of schools there. They don't feel that children will be safe. In fact, what they would like to see, they're among the organizations that would like to see the reopening of schools perhaps pushed back much further if possible. What is the status of schools in that area, and have you been in touch with that group of concerned parents?
I haven't been in touch with them at the moment. I have met with them beforehand, but I've just been involved in a really interesting discussion now with a pediatric pulmonologist. And people have this idea that somehow if we wait for another 2 or 3 months, it's going to take away the risk, but it actually isn't. And she was explaining how the presumption in the beginning when schools were closed was that children were going to be, first of all, get sick very quickly and be super spreaders like they are with flu, for example. And she's saying that all the evidence that's coming in from around the world is showing exactly the opposite. She said, in fact, teachers as well are more at risk in the staff room than they are in the classroom. So, people say let's wait until after the peak, but the peak is still going to, there's still going to be the virus in the environment. So it's not going to suddenly disappear after the peak. So it really is a balancing act versus the risks to the children of not being in school and the risks of the virus, and putting into place mitigation measures to ensure the safety of our children and our teachers. So I believe, particularly in a community like Bishop Lavis, it's actually more harmful to keep them out of school because they are missing out on crucial for their education.
And MEC, you're quite right in that the science so far tells us that children do not have the worst, don't bear the brunt, if you will, of this COVID-19 pandemic, but there have been cases where children have contracted the virus and indeed died. But in South Africa, you also have the worsening element where a lot of children do live in homes where they are, if they were to come down with COVID-19, would have to go back to homes where they live with parents with pre-existing conditions, grandparents and that sort of thing. Are you doing anything then actively to try and calm the fears of communities that worry about things such as what I've just outlined?
Certainly, and that's exactly why I was so happy to hear this doctor saying that, because she's saying that the evidence is showing that the children don't actually spread it very much either. So, I mean, what I've seen in some communities is children they don't even know there is a lockdown. I mean, I've seen some communities, I went last week to a community where children were running around playing catches around by the river in a poor community, and they will actually be safer in school because they will be taught about social distancing. It will be enforced in school. They will have to have a mask, which we have procured for them, and they will have to learn about sanitizing their hands and so on. So, there are obviously concerns, and we certainly are doing everything we can to try and allay those concerns. But I also would like, to suggest that people get medical advice as well, in their own homes as to what measures they can put in place to protect people in their homes.
So the rest of the country reopens, the other 8 provinces reopen schools, or at least they're set to do so on June 8th. What would have been the harm in the Western Cape just waiting and reopening with everyone else?
Well, I believe that a number of schools in other parts of the country have also opened. I've heard anecdotal issues confirming that. What is the harm of us not waiting? That's the other question. There's a lot of confusion in the system, and a lot of people have contacted me after I made that announcement, which I had to make at the last minute because they didn't know what we were going to do. People had to come back from, to hostels, for example. A lot of work had been put in, and people were saying, why on earth must we work towards something that the National Minister, in fact, asked us to do? She asked us to get ready for the 1st of June. We've done that, and now because other provinces haven't, we must now wait again. What must our teachers do for another week while they've already been preparing the whole of last week for children to come back this week?
You talk about the health, or I beg your pardon, not the health minister, but rather the education minister saying that June 1st would be the date to reopen, but she's now said June 8th is now the new date. And there's also, with the Western Cape and national government, of course, the dynamic that we can never ignore, that you've got an ANC-run national government, the Western Cape is run by the DA. Are we not, with this decision that you've taken to reopen, not risking a politicization of an issue that should be above DA-ANC dynamics unnecessarily?
The minister gazetted the 1st of June as the date. She's been discussing it. She made a public announcement about that a few weeks ago. She put that in the government gazette on Friday. She's done an amended government gazette yesterday where she again gazetted the 1st of June. If she wanted to enforce the 8th of June, that would have been the ideal opportunity for her to do so. That isn't what was decided. There was no decision at KEM, actually, unfortunately to say. We don't normally talk out of KEM, but I see some people are. And there was no fixed decision taken at KEM. It was decided that the minister would manage it. So it is not the case. We don't play politics with education, and we will not compromise our children's education because other provinces aren't ready.
All right. Very quick one, MEC. We also had SATU, the teachers' union, on the program yesterday, and they were also quite unhappy with the decision for the Western Cape to reopen. Have you heard from them? And are all your teachers showing up at the schools you've reopened?
I haven't had figures about all our teachers, but as I said, all our schools were open, so I assume the majority of teachers were there. I'm also unhappy about the way SATU is acting, quite frankly, and some other unions too. It was completely inappropriate that they were making announcements on Sunday about when schools were going back, when children were going back, not the minister. And actually, that is what caused a lot of the confusion. I've also been told that in some provinces, they're telling teachers now, don't teach any grade other than the grades that you are supposed to teach. They are being obstructive, and it's not in the interest of the children.
Debbie Schafer, Western Cape Education MEC, thank you so much for your time.